The Winnipeg Jets are now 10-1-0 after making the Columbus Blue Jackets look like an ECHL team. A dominant performance from start to finish and Winnipeg's best game of the season.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, we are chatting about Winnipeg after they just came away with a, quite frankly, crushing, dominant 6-2 victory over Columbus. This is by far, I would say, the most complete game from start to finish the Jets have played. They've played some good games this year, and they've certainly scored a pile of goals, but I would say from the first drop of the puck to the end of the game, Winnipeg played a perfect 60 minutes. Now, there are some things the Jets will probably, criticize themselves for. As in all things, they'll always look to improve because that's what professionals do. But if you're looking at it from a macro level, this is about as close to a perfect game, especially against a pesky opponent that actually had a pretty good record coming into this game, 5-3-1, like Columbus. They have made life very difficult for opponents. And the Jets basically made them look like they weren't even in the same league. So we'll chat about that game in just a moment and some big takeaways. But before we go any further, just wanted to let you know that tonight's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, which you can start the season with a big return with, because new customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets guaranteed if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now, like I said, the Jets basically just went through Columbus and made them look like a team that didn't belong in the same arena. It's rare that you see the Jets this year completely do that from every part and every aspect of the game. Even in games where the Jets have scored 4, 5, 6 goals, usually their opponents have had at least a little more space and time to actually do stuff. In this one, Columbus basically had nothing. I know that they did have like 22 shots on goal, and they did score a couple of greasy ones, but on the whole, Winnipeg basically didn't let the Blue Jackets breathe from start to finish. This was as close to a totally dominant game as it gets. And I'd actually say it was, just without even qualification, it was a dominant performance. Every line was good. All the defense pairings were strong. Really, you didn't have anyone with performances that you would feel were lagging behind. I mean, technically, yes, maybe the Kupari line didn't quite dominate as crushingly as everyone else. But I mean, the Jets came in and basically little broed the Blue Jackets. So a very impressive game. This, again, was their best performance of the year. And I think it's worth pointing out that Columbus has been, again, a really annoying opponent. They're not exactly a deep team, but they have some skill, they have some speed, and they have, a fairly decent back end that's kind of kept them in games. But tonight, it wasn't close. The Jets basically played Harlem Globetrotters against the Blue Jackets and sent them home early, right? A lot of fans were leaving the stands, and with a 6-2 scoreline, it's not hard to see why. I would say that, obviously, a couple of key groups stood out. The Nemesnikov line, which did allow a few more scoring opportunities against and maybe had, I guess, the quote, end quote, worst outing of any of the lines, still, put on a pile of goals. Ehlers had a hat trick, 4 points on the evening. Nemesnikov was a +3 on the evening. Perfetti actually should have had a couple of assists, I feel like. I think just because of the definition of change of possession, he sort of was a little unlucky, but he actually could have had 2 assists credited to him. And, the Lowry line, which we'll talk about later in this episode, absolutely crushed. The top line, quite frankly, could have had 2 to 3 goals. I don't know how they didn't. Kyle Connor, man, and you see that his name is spotlighted for some special consideration. I don't know, dude. Like, this is the best I think I've ever seen him play. And Connor has just been, I don't know how to describe his performance between previous years and this season. We did see some of it last year towards the end of the year. And I know that he had a big scoring streak at the start of last season before he got injured, but the way that his game has grown into a complete, more 200 footish game is very different from the start of last season. It's more like what we saw when Winnipeg started getting towards the playoffs last year, and he started to show more defensive commitment. But this year, Connor has fully taken on the mantle of being a driver, and I think it was in full display tonight. He really should have had more points. He had an assist, and that assist just happened to be what I might suggest is maybe the best single play of his career. If you get a chance to watch the highlight, it was jaw-dropping. It's one of those plays where you just sort of let your mouth hang a little bit and you sort of audibly gasp. It was that good. Incredible patience, a nearly pitch-perfect play, a beautiful dropped pass to Velarde, and it was just, it's the kind of play that you just, you die to see. A truly beautiful artistic moment. Everyone else really was good. I think this is also probably worth, shouting out Comrie for another really solid game from him. Comrie does occasionally look like he's going to, maybe concede a bit more, but somehow he always manages to come up with that extra save. Maybe he robs a good chance. There were a couple of turnovers in front of him. I think the early one with Monahan was especially close, but, Comrie makes a great glove save. And then later in the game, I think the Nemestikov line had a low slot turnover, might have been off of Ehlers or something. And, in comes Comrie to keep it very much in Winnipeg's favor. Not that at that point it really would have made a difference, but, I think the most important thing is just having a guy in net that you can trust behind Hellebuyck. Because, Hellebuyck is the best goalie in the league, right? And, I think Columbus's broadcast apparently said something to that effect, which is great because they're 100% right. I would actually go so far as to say Hellebuyck may end up being, in my lifetime, the best Jet player in any position that I watch. He is, there's really no equal. The only other player that I can think of that's kind of had the career that he's had is Henrik Lundqvist. And Lundqvist is truly one of those special goalies that, you really do call a once-in-a-generation type. Shesterkin may eventually get there, but he's still got some time to do that. So, in this game, having Comrie put on a really competent performance, and now he's got a 9-1-4 on the season, that's just great. You really can't be upset about it. I think, this has been a great find to have him back. I just actually like Comrie a lot. He just seems like a really fun person. I highly encourage you, if you haven't gotten a chance to, if you want a little bit of a laugh, he gave an answer about what sound do you think a jet makes? And his answer is just really, really, really funny. One of the funniest responses I've ever heard from a Jets player in an interview, partly because of the way he breaks down the whole question and considers all of these different circumstances in an unnecessary amount of detail. Bless him. He's fun. He also happens to be pretty solid in net. So great find for the Jets. Glad he came back. And, in this game, if there's one thing the Jets will probably nitpick themselves over, and really this is nitpicking, but, the puck management maybe could have been a little better. I wouldn't really say I care that much. In other games, it's been an issue at times too. And again, they don't really get burned by it. And for the most part, they are usually good at trying to recover the puck if they make a mistake or something. And so, again, hard to really be hypercritical of that. Otherwise, the Jets played a strong game. They did have one maybe blemish on the PK where they weren't as aggressive and ended up conceding, a net front tip to Monahan. But, again, hard to really be upset about it. I would say, from start to finish, like I said, this was Winnipeg's best and most complete game of the year. And against a team that has given opponents a bit of a rough time. So great on the Jets, a huge win. And I want to spend some time spotlighting a couple of players or in some cases line combos that I think are really worth spotlighting. And I know I've talked about the next one before in Kyle Connor, but thought it, again, really bears worth repeating that honestly, this might be the best I have ever seen him play over a sustained period. We'll chat about what has maybe changed for him in just a little bit. Before we go any further, did want to shout out our friends and partners at Gametime. When it comes to buying tickets, a lot of you are used to putting a ticket in your cart and then finding out that $30 looks more like $60 when you go to check out. And you're asking yourself, did I add an extra ticket? As it turns out, nope. Still the same ticket, but you get hit with a bunch of surprise fees and hidden charges. No one likes that, and Gametime doesn't either. They're not about wasting your time, and so they offer an all-in pricing option which you can toggle on so that you see what you're paying for upfront. It makes life a lot easier, and they even offer you a brand new feature called Gametime Picks that allows you to sort through all of the fluff and bring you only the absolute best deals on the hottest seats. For a lot of us who are obviously thinking about some big fall season sports or maybe some big concerts, having the option to get the best deals up front and even get a nice little view of an upcoming of like your seat view is fantastic. And right now, Gametime is even offering an exclusive zone deal for the NHL Winter Classic event at Wrigley Field. Just go to Gametime to purchase tickets and get 10% off bleacher seating and 20 to 25% off on home plate area seats. And this is not the only deal that they offer. They've got other sorts of zone deals. You just want to go through their promotions, check them out. Be sure to get in on the action, because we even offer a really cool deal for all of you who are first-time Gametime users. You just download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we're just chatting about some big takeaways from a Columbus game that presented itself to be a bit of a challenge for Winnipeg on the road, and instead Winnipeg just kind of ate through the competition like it was nothing. Their most dominant win of the season, and I think it's worth pointing out a couple of players who, quite frankly, have been doing this for multiple games now. And this one, I think, is really worth shouting at, and I'm pretty sure I talked about him last episode, but it's Kyle Connor. Like, he really does deserve a lot of spotlight this year, because I would say from the many years that I've sat watching this team, and specifically Kyle Connor, this is by like a country mile his best hockey ever. He is defensively marking more. He's being more physically engaged. He is winning puck battles along the walls. He's making great breakout feeds. He's leading transition. Look, he will have his defensive warts. He misses assignments all the time, and he'll have some turnovers and stuff that, you don't love, but like, he's giving so much in the opposite end of the ice that it's just really hard to find much fault in him. He's been outstanding. This is like the best hockey of his career, and it's his most complete game. He's become, a really great attacking presence in the offensive zone, finding good passing seams, getting into those softer areas. And I'm not sure if it's because he's recognized that he needs to take on a bigger role. Scheifele, I think, is starting to slow down. I don't know if it's like an age thing. Maybe he's injured. Maybe it's just a slower start to the year. But when you look at Scheifele at even strength, I think it's noticeable that he doesn't seem to have the same explosive step. It's hard for him to, get up the ice against a faster defense. And it feels like when he's in the OZ, it just seems like he's a step behind the play. And again, I don't know if it's like a thing that's going to last necessarily, but it's noticeable when you compare it to like Connor, right? KFC has become a much more noticeable threat on that line, and he's just everywhere all the time. He's attacking the space behind the goal. He's attacking the slot, the face-off circles, the sidewalls. It doesn't seem to matter. And he's also leading controlled zone entries and stuff. I mean, he's just doing so much more of what I wanted Ehlers to do on that line as well, which is great because now you can maybe spread the talent out a little bit more. And Connor has never himself been a driver. And so it's fascinating to see him evolve into this player who's really taken it upon himself to be the guy on this line, which is kind of funny because for a long time, that's why I wanted Ehlers up there, is because neither Connor nor Scheifele had really seized that bull by the horn. And now KFC is kind of doing it. Is he the best at it? No, not necessarily. And that's fine. Like, I don't need that line to be perfect. I just want it to be functional. And I think it's getting to the point where KFC is able to elevate the play a good amount enough to where so long as they keep scoring, you can probably get away with maybe them not winning every matchup, on some of these games. And I think it's really helpful that KFC has stepped up in such a tremendous way, because he's just ripping opponents apart. that little stutter step and stuff that he's had and some of the patience and stick handling that he displayed in tonight's game was just to die for. It's the sort of play that I think I've really wanted from him for a while, because when it comes to one-on-one matching, matchups against defenders and stuff, no question he's always been good at it. But I think a lot of his game has been a little, I don't want to say one-dimensional, because I feel like that's not the right way to characterize it, but it's been at a level to where, he's more of a complimentary guy and not somebody who I can see elevating his teammates. But Connor has been just a different player this year. It's been thrilling to watch, and I don't know what changed with him, but he's just been really taking it to the next level, and it's been very helpful for Velarde, who's starting to get up to speed again after a bit of a slower start. Gabriel still has moments where he does turn over the puck and stuff and looks a little bit sluggish, but so long as Connor is finding him in those softer spots, I think that's going to continue to be an improvement, right? And Scheifele, I think, is starting to get into those positions a little more frequently. Connor is finding him on good slot attack areas and stuff. So it's good to see that. The top line, I think, still does have a question of speed. I think when you face really fast teams, that's where, some of those extended D zone shifts tend to be a bit of a problem for them. But against opponents like Columbus or Detroit that are maybe a little bit slower, it's actually kind of like open season. It's like watching the Jets power play again. Because obviously when Connor, Scheifele, and Velarde have time and space, it doesn't matter if it's an even strength or on special teams. As long as they can be patient and have that time and space to work with, they will carve you up. And that's really just the one thing that they need to do their job at its best. And when opponents maybe take that away, it's a little harder. But Connor has been more resistant to that being a problem this year. Just really deserves, a lot of accolades to start the year. He was named the second star this past month. Absolutely deserved it. Arguably, on a track to have his best season of his career. He's already at 18 points or something in 11 games. Realistically, could have had 3 points tonight. Just on an unholy tear. And, for having watched him, and quite frankly, I've been hard on him over the years because I know that he could be a better player, but I don't know that I ever expected him to start doing some of this. And I don't know if it's the change in the coaching staff or something that's really been able to get this, this level of Connor out of him. But I just hope it lasts a whole year. If he can keep doing this, that's just awesome. He's been on fire for Winnipeg. He looks like he's going to score on every single shift. And you just have never seen a level of play like this out of him. Even in his seasons where he's scoring 40-plus goals, he was still a guy who felt like more of a complementary piece and not necessarily the one driving results. But this year, man, his forced turnovers and stuff, it's hard to overstate how impressive his turnaround has been. So great to see him thriving. Very helpful for Velarde. It might give Scheifele a little bit of time to work through some of his own stuff. And I'm sure for Arniel, it does give him a little bit of relief. He is facing a lot of pressure from, us fans to try and get the top line going a bit. And finally, it's starting to show some real results. So hopefully they can keep doing that against some of the better teams out there. So far, Winnipeg has faced a variety of interesting opponents. Not a lot of defensively elite squads, but some good teams with some really good offenses. So something to keep in mind, especially in those games where maybe the ice seems a little more tilted against the Jets. But so far, the goaltending and the special teams have been on just another planet enough to, for now, help the Jets figure out some of their other challenges. Because again, this team is a very interesting mixture of stuff. The formula is still in progress, but you're rocking a 45% power play, an 80+% PK, which has been, until the last couple of games, almost spotless. And so, so long as you can keep doing that, you will get very far during the regular season until you can maybe just figure out the exact balance that you want with your top nine. So, Arniel seems to be making some good changes. His ice time splits are looking really favorable. Ehlers is playing, almost as much as Connor is. And it seems like, Arniel has recognized which players are starting to lead the way for him. Ehlers himself has been very interesting this year because I would say that generally speaking, this has kind of been his most topsy-turvy start to the year, where the highs are really high and the lows are really frustrating. But, offensively, at least, he is still putting up some very, very big crooked numbers. So happy to see it. Fifth career hat trick for him. Fourth or fifth? I want to say it's fifth. Huge congrats to him. Very exciting. And I think for, a lot of us who have been waiting for him to start really breaking out, his recent point streak into offensive production is a welcome sight. This team's really going to need it. They're going to lean heavily on their stars in the coming weeks. November is one of the toughest stretches of this season until the All-Star break. And so, or not the All-Star break, but the February break. But for Winnipeg, just keep chugging along. You are now 10-1-0. Things are feeling pretty good. And, they are going to face some really great teams and really show the league what they can be over the next couple of weeks. So excited for that. But there is one more unit that I think really deserves a ton of attention. They have been one of the lines that I think has really carried the Jets, even when the 5v5 play has maybe been a little more lackluster from some of the skill lines. I'm, of course, talking about the Lowry line, which had a footprint in this game, a pretty noticeable one, and we'll chat about what has made them so successful, not only this year, but in seasons past, in just a little bit. Before we go too much further, though, was worth shouting out our friends and partners at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. Maybe you're getting a hunch in the middle of a Ravens game or a Packers game, maybe even a Jets game if you're one of those people who somehow is both a Jets fan from New York and a Winnipeg Jets fan. You have had some interesting highs and lows this season, I will tell you. But hey, you finally won a game. You had one of the most improbable touchdown catches of the year. Was a blast to watch that. But if you're still wondering about how the team is doing, maybe in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're placing your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started again with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's all with FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Hey, friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets. Welcome back. Thanks so much for hanging out with us this evening on your Friday evening. Obviously, a big game for the Jets just now. A big 6-2 victory. The most complete and best overall game they've played this year. And Winnipeg, now gets to go, come back home for a game, face a very good opponent in Tampa Bay, and hopefully add their 11th win of the season. And if there's a line that I think is going to help them against a pesky Tampa Bay team, it's going to be the Lowry line. This group has been transcendent this year, and they've been good for a while now, but I feel like the one thing that this line has maybe just missed out on is just goals. They do all of the hardest work for this team, and somehow they just don't often get rewarded for it. Lowry doesn't always finish the chances that you think he would. Appleton has maybe missed on a couple of opportunities in the past, and Niederreiter, I think I was always wondering if he'd maybe score a few extra points for the Jets. Seems like all of them this year have started to finally get rewarded for their efforts. If there's a line that really deserves to just have a lot of offensive success, it's the Lowry line. They eat some of the hardest matchups. They have at times been Winnipeg's de facto second line. They play a fair few amount of minutes, but they often eat some of the hardest 5v5 matchups, and you know what? It has been paying off big time. Lowry is near a point per game. Appleton had a beautiful goal tonight. Niederreiter is, they're all actually sitting at 9 points apiece through 11 games. And it's been just a joy to watch them not only dominate control of the game at 5v5, but also start putting those opportunities away. It's literally the only thing that they ever missed in previous years. And if it's somehow sustainable this year, that gives the Jets an incredible asset with that trio. Suddenly you don't have to worry as much about maybe bringing up a Shiberkov to reinforce that line specifically. I still think Shiberkov should definitely come up later this year to potentially reinforce your top nine. Where you use him at this point is, totally up to the Jets, and they've got plenty of chances to kind of mess around. I think Winnipeg, with the right moves, has the potential to be as deep as it was offensively in the 17-18 year. This third line is crushing its minutes. The fourth line is winning loads of battles. I think they're a net negative somehow, just because, in terms of actual goals against, they've maybe conceded like 2 or something, but they haven't really scored anything. But I mean, given how much they've softened the opposition by being a super strong forechecking unit, you just don't care, right? The main thing is that they generally win their matchups. And the Lowry line has really led the way doing that. It's made life easier on everyone else. And it's why I always advocate for making sure that you have your best line actually winning your matchups, because once you tire and wear down your opponents, it makes them prone to mistakes. It makes them, more vulnerable. And for players like Scheifele, Connor, Ehlers, Perfetti, guys who are super smart, who recognize those opportunities, they can take advantage a lot more freely and more frequently. So, the Jets have an interesting formula cooking. Obviously, I think that there's still room for growth, but they are, already showing and flexing some impressive skills in a couple of key areas. And if they find that perfect balance that I think they're still looking for at even strength, they're going to be unstoppable. They're already, maybe 3/4 of the way there. They've got the special teams, they've got the power play, they've got a couple of depth lines that are absolutely roasting. If the top, 2 skill lines produce, at a great level consistently, you're feeling pretty good about their chances throughout the rest of the regular season. It'll be a slog, and there will be injuries, and it'll be a tough road. But I think the Jets, are certainly primed for, at the bare minimum, making the playoffs. I think the question then becomes what happens after that. The postseason kind of becomes a little bit of a different game, not because the style of the game necessarily changes, but you're facing the same opponent for a 7-game series up to 7 games, and that naturally necessitates some changes to the way that you think about how they scout you, how they match up against you, and which of your weaknesses and strengths they're going to game plan around. So a lot of interesting stuff, but we are still just 11 games into the season, so that's far into the future for the Jets. This team really does have the potential to play much deeper into May. I think that'd be awesome. I, for one, am tired of not watching the Jets in April. I miss the days when, going through a round or two was really an expectation. And I think the Jets have the ability to get there this year. And, with continued growth for this team, they are already showing that they can, even playing imperfect hockey, be, the top standings team in the league. And so now it's just getting everything else all on the same page, and you are starting to cook with gas. But, games like these where the Jets can really flex their muscles and show how good they can be at their best, I think is great. They escaped any serious injuries, near as I can tell, although Nemesnikov keeps getting beat up. I feel bad for him. He seemingly gets wrecked a little bit, and that's probably why it's maybe helpful that Lambert isn't playing right now in that role. I think, the physicality of the game has definitely been noticeable, and even Vlad, who's a really tough trooper and an absolute warrior, is kind of looking like he's smarting a little in some of these games. So hopefully he stays healthy, but the rest of the Jets seem to be flying and cruising. You just really got to hope that it continues for as long as possible. Bank every last point, because eventually, if things start to slow down, you want to be sitting pretty to give yourself time to experiment and make adjustments as need be. But so far, staying the course has paid off big time, and hopefully it continues to do so going forward. But for tonight's episode, that is going to be all the time that we have. Obviously, next week we'll have some thoughts on Winnipeg versus Tampa Bay. I'm going to give a score prediction of 4-3 Jets. I think that's going to be a close game. I think Tampa Bay is not as good as it was in previous years, but still, some really underappreciated talent that they've got. Plus, guys like Gensel and Point who are still pretty great. But as long as the Lowry line can find ways to contain some of their top skill, let the rest of the Jets lineup feast. You've got a confident Kyle Connor who apparently wants to score 10 goals every shift. So maybe it's time for him to get his first hat trick of the season. But let me know your score predictions for that game below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets on Twitter. For tonight's episode, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. Thank you so much for listening and making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We'll see you back here next week, so see you then. Have a great night, and as always, go Jets go.